This video is going to be about Rav Kook's eulogy upon the passing of Herzl. It's going to differ from some of the other videos in that it's not going to be an overall discussion of it as much as just reading through a difficult text. The background to this, how we first came upon it, was on page 65 in your booklets when we were reflecting on the Jews' exile that we came upon in Yirmiyahu, and we asked sort of what it means to be a Jew in exile versus a Jew in Israel. And in our source book, we saw this quote from the Chafetz Chaim, translated by Rabbi Pliskin, where he compares the Torah and Eretz Yisrael to the relationship of a body and a soul. And at first you're like, that's beautiful. He's saying both things are really important. We need our bodies and we need our souls. But as you read a little closer, you realize he's making a distinction between the body and the soul, which one can survive alone and which one cannot. And so at first, he said, well, the soul cannot exist alone in this world, and the body alone is just dust from the earth. It sounds like either one is kind of worthless. But then as we continue, when he says that the soul of the Jewish people is the sacred Torah, there are many commandments, many mitzvot that cannot be fulfilled outside of Israel. Nevertheless, with all the difficulties involved in living in exile, we as a people are alive. And so he's essentially saying the soul, even though in this world, right, a soul can't really exist without a body, but the substance of it survives. If forced to pick between the two, the Chafetz Chaim is saying that ultimately Am Yisrael can survive with just the Torah without the land, whereas if we had the land of Israel without Torah, that's like a body without a soul. It's just a piece of land. And so implicit in what the Chafetz Chaim is saying is an idea which was certainly very relevant in his time with pre-state Zionism, that if we have to survive in Galus without the Torah, with the Torah but without the land, we're not happy about it, but we can. The Torah is our soul; it still keeps us going, even if it's been removed from our body, from Eretz Yisrael. But the reverse, to try and stay in Eretz Yisrael without Torah, without mitzvot, that's like a dead body. And so he's telling you pretty clearly what he thinks of the secular Zionist movement that was existing then. There was no state of Israel yet, but you had these people who aspired to build up a Jewish state in Eretz Yisrael, but they specifically wanted it to be a secular state without Torah and mitzvah because they saw it as somehow substituting for the exile Jewish identity, that in exile maybe we needed the Torah and mitzvah to keep us together, but if we could have our own land in Israel, then we'd be Jewish just by having a Jewish state in Israel. We wouldn't need the Torah anymore. And the Chafetz Chaim is saying, no, that's like having a body, but a dead body, a body that's just a piece of dust without a soul. This prompted us to then want to discuss, are there other religious thinkers who maybe found some sort of religious meaning in this early pre-state Zionism, despite the secular nature of that Zionism? So we read this piece by Rav Kook. Its Hebrew is very hard, so I'm really just going to try to read through it over here, and you can figure out the message on your own. Says Rav Kook, this characteristic of loving the nation was revealed in Achav. Achav loved Israel a lot. Achav followed on the way of his father Omri, who was the first king of that dynasty. Omri had been a general in the army, and when the previous king was killed, Omri seized power, and he actually moved the capital to Shomron, the hill of Shomron in northern Israel. And so Chazal say about Omri that even though Omri was a big sinner in many ways, but he merited having a dynasty, Shehosif Irachad Be'eretz Yisrael, because at least this Omri, who was an idolater and a wicked man in many other ways, he added a city to Eretz Yisrael by building up the city of Shomron. We skipped this phrase in class, so I'm going to skip it here as well. But it's saying about Achav, Shehaya Ma'amid Panim B'milchama. Achav as well, who again in many ways we know, Rav Kook's assuming you know that Achav is basically a wicked person who promoted Avodah Zarah. Nevertheless, Haya Ma'amid Panim B'milchama. Achav literally stood up with his face. In other words, he stood boldly and proudly in war. And Rav Kook's alluding to a battle that's described at the end of Melachem Aleph, where Achav was struck by arrows, and Gam achar shenechatu bo achitzim, even after the arrow struck him, Achav continued to stand up, kadesh lo lahavit et Yisrael, so as not to scare, intimidate Yisrael. The story that happened there is Achav was shot by arrows, and he knew he's dying, but if they drag his body away, then everyone's going to see the king's body dragged away, and they're going to all lose their morale and fall in battle. And so Achav asked them instead to prop up his body in his chariot so that people will see the king standing up. We compared it a little bit to the movie Weekend in Bernie's, for those who are familiar, where his body is propped up even though he's dead, so that people who watch will think he's alive and they'll keep fighting, thinking the king is with them in battle. Says Rav Kook, you have to admire that about Achav for all the other things we don't like about him. This extra boldness, this extra bravery, this brave spirit, that only comes from an extra amazing love of his people. And so the same Achav, who's a terrible idolater, he worships Baal. In 9th grade Navi, you learned about how he seemed to have no qualms about taking the vineyard of Navot after his wife Yosef had Navot killed on false premises. And despite all that, the same Achav who did all these terrible things, he was this valiant king in battle. We skip the next part here where Rav Kook tries to find some way that Achav maybe did respect Torah on some level, but Achav did basically halach b'darchei Izebel. He basically followed the ways of Izebel, his wife, who was this foreign princess, this Phoenician princess, who brought chukot toivot shel goyei haaretz, that she brought these abominable practices of her nation. Nevertheless, the same Achav who did that was valiant in battle. And so Rav Kook is telling us this Achav, who's married to Izebel, who's a wicked, wicked man in so many ways, nevertheless was a valiant leader in battle. And Rav Kook compares and contrasts Achav with Yoshiyahu, whom we did study about in Navi this semester. Yoshiyahu was a heroic king who, as we learned, led a tremendous tshuva movement. He tried to eradicate Avodah Zarah from the land. And Yoshiyahu, like Achav, eventually died in battle. Yoshiyahu, as we discussed earlier this semester, got involved in this battle that he really had no business even being in. There was going to be a major battle in the city of Karkemish, in what today would be southeastern Turkey, and the king of Egypt wanted to fight in that battle, and in order to get his army from Egypt to Karkemish, he had to march it through Yehuda. And all he wanted was permission to cross through Yoshiyahu's territory, but Yoshiyahu tried to stop that, and so on the way through, the king of Egypt said, I don't care, I'm coming through anyway. And when Yoshiyahu tried to stop him, his Egyptian soldiers shot Yoshiyahu again and again. He was shot by dozens and dozens of arrows and dies. So Yoshiyahu has in common with Achav that he's killed by arrows on the battlefield. So Rav Kook is comparing them here, and Rav Kook says, Yoshiyahu, he's kind of a mirror image of Achav. Yoshiyahu higbir atzad haruchani ad ein domeh b'chol malachim. Yoshiyahu strengthened the spiritual side, the tzad haruchani, the spiritual angle of his kingdom. Right? As we discussed earlier this semester, he got rid of bamot, he got rid of idols, he forced everyone to come back to the Beit HaMikdash. Yoshiyahu did all that. Ke'edut HaKatuv, as the pasuk testifies about him, Kamohu lo haya lefanav melech asher shav Hashem el Hashem b'chol levav b'chol nafsho v'chol ma'odo. There was no king before him who returned to Hashem with all his heart, his whole life. I mean, Yoshiyahu literally paid with his life for it. His life, everything that he had, all his property. Right? This is echoing the phrase we know from Shema, V'aftar Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha b'chol ma'odecha. So Yoshiyahu fulfilled that wholeheartedly. Yoshiyahu, he wanted that so badly, he wanted us to be so holy that he didn't want Am Yisrael to have any relationship with the nations. And that's what killed him, right? He wanted us to have nothing to do with any non-Jewish nation that might influence us badly, so much so that he wouldn't even allow Egypt to peacefully march their army through his kingdom. That ended up being what killed him. So it says Rav Kook, Bezeh, with this zeal, this passion Yoshiyahu had, that he didn't want Am Yisrael, or he says Israel here, but really it's Yehuda that Yoshiyahu is the king of. He didn't want his kingdom of Yehuda to have anything to do with any pagan nation, including them marching their army through. Bezeh viter al divrei Yirmiyahu Hanavi. Yoshiyahu literally took a pass, but I translated here as he did not heed. He didn't listen to the words of Yirmiyahu Hanavi, because Yirmiyahu had warned him that as great as Yoshiyahu's tshuva was, Hashem still commanded, Tziva mipi Hashem, Lahaniach lavor be'eretz Yisrael et chel Mitzrayim. Hashem still wanted the Egyptian army to pass through. Hashem felt that as good as Yoshiyahu's tshuva had been, it was still somewhat deficient for the reasons we discussed at the beginning of the semester. There were people who didn't follow Yoshiyahu, either we did a Malbim and a Radak on this, that either in their hearts they still liked Avodah Zarah, or maybe not just in their hearts, maybe even in private when Yoshiyahu wasn't looking and his army, wasn't looking. In private, they were closet idolaters. In private, they were still worshiping Avodah Zarah. And so for whatever reason, Hashem felt that the nation was not on such a high spiritual level that they could stand up to the Egyptian army. And so Hashem had told Yoshiyahu, let them through, just give in. And Yoshiyahu was so passionate with his love of Hashem and his desire for Am Yisrael to be completely sovereign and independent without the Egyptian army marching through Yehuda, that he ended up paying with his life for that. And so Rav Kook is saying to this point that Achav and Yoshiyahu are kind of opposites. Achav is this valiant man in war who stands up for his nation in war, but he's a terrible idolater. Yoshiyahu is someone who does everything he can to eradicate Avodah Zarah, but he dies in a war that he had no business being in. Even the Navi didn't want him to be in that war, because he tried to be firmer than Yirmiyahu, firmer than Hashem, to keep the Egyptian army out of his kingdom, even when Yirmiyahu was telling them that Hashem wants them to go through. And Rav Kook says that in our redemption process, our process of Mashiach, we have Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. Mashiach ben Yosef is like Achav. He's this valiant warrior who fights in battle and dies in battle defending Am Yisrael. And then Yoshiyahu is like Mashiach ben David, the ultimate Mashiach, who is holier and more spiritual. And Rav Kook seems to be saying that we need both of these. We need people like Achav to come first, like Mashiach ben Yosef, who sets the stage for a leader like Yoshiyahu, Mashiach ben David. And since Rav Kook wrote these words when Herzl passed away, it prompted people to speculate that perhaps Rav Kook meant that Herzl himself was like Mashiach ben Yosef and like Achav, this leader who does bold, valiant things for Am Yisrael, even though he's completely detached from Avodat Hashem. Or if not Herzl personally, then perhaps the entire secular Zionist enterprise is like that. It's this movement which has to be done in order to bring us back to Eretz Yisrael and build us up as a country, and setting the stage for the time when this movement will die out and will give way to a more religious brand of Zionism. Okay, so that covers the basics of this text, and based on what we read now, you should be able to answer both what he thinks are the positive character traits of Achav and the negative character traits of Yoshiyahu. I'm just going to explain a little bit more here what Mashiach ben Yosef is and where it comes from, in case that's confusing to people. So in the book of Zechariah, Perek Yud Bet, Pasuk Yud, Zechariah 12:10, Zechariah seems to be talking about some future messianic, apocalyptic war that's going to happen. And in that context, V'hibitu elev esher dakaru. You're going to see this person who was pierced, who was stabbed, presumably stabbed to death. And they're going to mourn this person alive. Saftu alav k'mitzpei al hayachid. This person's death is going to be greatly mourned. So much so that in the next pasuk, Zechariah says, "Bayom hahu yigdal hamispeid b'Yerushalayim k'mispeid hadar rimon b'fikat Megidon." On that day, this person, this important figure, who's not really described, but who dies in battle, is going to be mourned in Yerushalayim like the mourning of Hadar Rimon in the valley of Megidon. And we don't really know what Hadar Rimon means or what Megidon has to do with anything here. The English word Armageddon is from Megidon here. So Targum Yonatan tells us, and this is quoted in the Gemara as well, that the mourning over this Mashiach ben Yosef, that the figure who dies here is Mashiach ben Yosef, who's not mentioned by name in the Navi, and the mourning over him is going to be what, like Hadar Rimon and Megidon, meaning like the mourning over Achav bar Omri Diktal Hadad bar Tavrimon, like Achav, who was killed in battle by an Aramean king named Hadad, whose father's name was Tavrimon, so he's called Hadad Rimon, meaning Hadad, son of Tavrimon, and like the mourning over Yoshia bar Amon Dikatal Paro Chagira Bivikat Megidon, and like Yoshiyahu, who was killed in the valley of Megidon. So according to the Targum, The mourning of Hadad Rimon in the valley of Megiddo refers to two separate events: the mourning over Achav, who was killed by Hadad ben Tavrimon, and the mourning of Yoshiah, who was killed in the valley of Megiddo. That's where Kook gets this idea of a messianic figure who resembles Achav and Yoshiah.